Good morning, good day, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to Redeem Investments Friday Fun Facts. For those of you that aren't familiar with Redeem Investments, we're a real estate private investment firm. We typically host this meeting called Friday Fun Facts the first Friday of each month. And so this month we have an esteemed colleague and friend, Brian Lucas. We're fellow West Point grads. He and I both live in Denver, and he's been in the trenches, for a few years now with regards to construction and development. So really exciting topic. The way the flow is going to work today, we're going to give Brian the floor for about 20-30 minutes to go through some remarks. Some housekeeping rules. There is a box for you to input Q&A. So if you have a question that comes up during the presentation, feel free to type those up in the chat. And depending on the flow of the presentation, I just may interject with Brian and throw those questions at him so we can have a little break in the presentation. But the goal today really is just to have a great dialogue, make sure everyone's getting some education and value from the topic at hand, and just letting Brian talk through his expertise. He has a ton of it. Great guy. From in keeping with the theme of the webinar, fun facts. One fun fact about Brian, he effectively ran a 100-mile ultramarathon. Just was it last year, Brian, or was it?
Year.
Yeah. So for folks that have heard of the Leadville 100, this is one of the world-class bike races out there up in the mountains. It's all above 12,000 feet. This gentleman decided to run it instead of biking it on a mountain bike, and so. Hence the good mountain persona. You see the beard, you see the good mountain persona right now. So that's the fun fact about Brian. I will turn it over to him now so we can get into the presentation.
Yeah, appreciate that, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for having me. Hope you find value in this today. Let me share my screen here. I always laugh at that picture that Michael has up there. That's like my 2017 LinkedIn photo. And, obviously I don't look like that anymore. So I feel like this is what construction in today's environment does to you. It gives you gray hair. So happy to share. Michael, can you see my screen or no?
Yep, we got it.
All right, cool. So my company, currently Echo Company Constructors, we are a general contractor in the Denver metro area. We have experience in residential, commercial, and government contracting, as well as our own developments. Company tagline is 100% or not at all. I firmly believe that if you commit to doing something, jump in with your whole heart and give it your best effort. So here's just a legal disclaimer. I'm just sharing, my experience, and there's no guarantees that this works for everybody, but we've had some success, so I'm happy to share. The agenda I'd like to cover today is just go over what our business model is, some past performance, where do you start, and then kind of talk you through our 18-unit condo project, which is currently active and almost finished. I think that one is a great example of building in today's environment, and then some closing thoughts and finish with some Q&A. So business model, Echo Company Constructors develops and build urban infill projects from start to finish. So I'm not a land developer. I don't buy raw land and develop it. I try to identify areas within the Denver metro area that, we believe there's potential for, sales and growth. We create the new legal entity every time. So it's Echo Company technically doesn't develop. The legal entity hires Echo Company to be the builder. We purchase the land, we develop the plans, handle the construction loan, build the project, sell the project, and then stay with customers after closing. We've developed 52 units since 2017, approximately 27 million in sales. And then we've guaranteed $20 million in construction loans. So this was one of my first projects that I embarked on in 2017. We completed it in 2018. This was a 12-unit project. We purchased 2 single-family lots. The building on the right side of the screen over here, we bought that lot first and essentially kind of assembled 2 parcels here to come up with about 12,000 square feet. I'll show you how we pro forma and model and kind of talk through this a little bit. So we bought 2 parcels of land, 12,000 square feet for $993,000. Put a construction loan in place through First Bank, who is local here. And this was the building cost, $3.152 million. The total finished square feet, 18,650, and the price to build came out to $169. I'd like to speak about building costs a bit. I feel like that's kind of one of those metrics that is challenging to dial in initially, especially if you don't have construction experience. It's hard to, build a pro forma and say, I think I can build it for 150 a square foot, or it's going to be 200 a square foot. I think some tips for new people trying to get involved would be, reach out to local builders. Don't be surprised if, they're not going to give you very detailed numbers, just because that takes a large amount of time to really dial in a budget. But if you ask them like, hey, what is your, price per square foot to build? You're probably going to hear different variations. And I'm just going to give you an example of, you can hear somebody tell you $150 a square foot to build, and then the next person's going to tell you $250 per square foot to build. Some reasons for the variations. I believe that not everybody speaks the same language. So there's hard costs that go into building, and there's soft costs that go into building. So when I say hard cost, I'm specifically referencing the material, the sticks, the bricks, the siding, the paint, the lights. Those would be your hard costs for building. Now, soft costs would be my survey, my soils testing, my architectural plans, structural plans, permit fees, tap fees. So breaking down hard and soft costs, just be specific when you're speaking to builders or trying to source a price per square foot to build, because yes, there can be significant variation in the numbers based on what people are considering building costs. Another great resource to figure out, building costs. I always like looking at all-in numbers on price to build. I would reach out to local lenders, start figuring out who are the active lenders who do construction loans in your area. Start building a relationship with the bankers. They're not going to give you anybody's, closing documents and stuff like that, but they'll have, the rough idea of like, hey, it's going to be, every bit of $250 per square foot all in to build a project like that. So it's a good baseline and a great place to start to really try to dial in, this part of the pro forma: building costs, finished square feet, and price to build. And Michael, if you want to stop me at any point, just let me know, or I'll keep walking through this. So 2 other resources out there, if you get a little further along and you have some plans, there's buildingconnected.com. We use that to bid out projects for our private clients sometimes. You'll need a set of plans to start getting numbers in, but it's another great resource to look into. And then there's also isquarefoot.com, which can help you start dialing some building costs. One important thing to keep in mind during development and in your building costs are interest carry, right? Like, what are going to be your carrying costs while you're developing the property? And then what is your interest carry while you're building the property? So when you start building a project, you do the excavation, that's a cost. Then you do the foundation, that's a cost. Then you go to the bank and you say, hey, here's what I've done. Let me draw this money off the construction loan. So now you owe interest carry on that, money that you've borrowed for the duration of the project. And you can kind of, put 2 and 2 together, that towards the end of the project, your carrying costs will be significant. My interest carry is, could be $10,000 to $13,000 a month. There's some lenders who will let you build that line item into the construction budget. And then there's other lenders who will tell you they want you to, finance that via cash. So just make sure you're very clear about, can I build interest carry into this loan or can I not? I always 100% of the time build it into the loan. So
hey, Brian, with that on interest carry, are there general rules of thumb that you recommend depending on certain types of investments, risk profile, where we're at in the cycle? What do you guys typically use as a rule of thumb for interest carry?
Typically how the bank does it, they'll do Wall Street Prime +1. So, you just kind of model it off that. And then I can, a project is kind of like a bell curve. Your costs are going to really ramp up, they're going to peak, and then your build costs are going to start coming down. So you can just take that, 5.75%, whatever it is today, and apply that to, your build costs to really figure out like, okay. And then honestly, I always add a buffer, right? Like P for plenty. If the bank's going to let me finance in, 150K in interest carry, I'm always trying to, P for plenty. Yeah, I think like I would personally, like I would not do one of these projects on hard money lending. I think it would be very difficult to make sense with. I've always used traditional bank financing just because the rates have always been more reasonable. So
thanks. Yeah, that's helpful. I guess from a timing perspective, like number of months of interest carry, I guess that was the follow-up question to that.
Yeah, so most of the time, I've done this first project, which, was the best performing one, the largest one. We built this in 10.5 months. So I think we had a 12-month, we built and sold in 10.5 months. And we had a 12-month construction loan in place. So on the 18 unit that you'll see at the end, I have a 24-month construction loan in place. Things are just taking longer. So yeah, banks are typically going to lend in that, 12 to 24 month time frame. So again, just, try your best to model accordingly. It's typically prime +1, and your costs are going to bell curve if your project runs smoothly. So it should be pretty stable to model that. So sales revenue, I feel like that's something that everybody can, figure out just based upon Zillow, Realtor.com. There's, the data's out there. Connecting with realtors, I think, is important. I would agree with, interviewing several of them. When I stepped into this project, our realtor was listing for 1% for us. I thought that was great from a financial perspective, but now, later in my career, I realized there's value in, partnering with the right realtor who brings the right knowledge and skill set to the table as well. So cheapest isn't always the best value. So just keep that in mind, but you should be able to project this number fairly close given all the data that's on the internet. So commission and closing costs, I typically just try to model about 6% at this day and age. So that's just a good baseline to keep in mind. Your commission plus your closing costs, relatively around 6%. So you get the net revenue, net profit. This project, we did well on it, with total cost minus the, net revenue, you come up with a net profit of, a little over 2 million, which is 32% on the cost of goods sold. So the bottom ratio, that is just the cash on cash return. A lot of times as a developer, again, like I understand the multifamily, you guys look at IRR and all that stuff. And honestly, in these projects, I'm getting out in 24 to 36 months, I would say, from start to finish. And we just kind of do a quick cash on cash return. So this financing vehicle we used was a 75% LTC, means loan to cost. So we brought 25% cash to the table, which was 1.1 million, and the bank lent us the 75%. So just did the quick 1.1 divided by 2 million. We came out with about 185% return on our cash. Any questions on this slide? All right, carry on here. So this was
Hey, Brian, there actually was a question that came in the Q&A box, in the chat box. Basically, they were asking if these are recourse loans.
Yes, these are recourse loans. I personally guarantee the business guarantees these loans, and then myself and business partner guarantee these loans. And then we had our investor and mentor who was in this project as well. They guaranteed the loan as well. So you will be personally guaranteeing these loans if you go traditional financing. So this deal was Sloan's Lake Duplex. I don't know if anybody took the time to go to our website, but we've done a couple other duplexes that just did not have the curb appeal. So what we started realizing is that, you need to invest a little bit more money on the curb appeal, right? So just, there's a quick value add, like putting the cedar and just some architectural features on the front of the duplex. It made a significant difference in, how the product felt. We purchased this land for $400,000. And that was on the higher side at the time. I think we bought this in 2018 as well, maybe 2017. But I had an investor who, gave us all cash. We purchased the land. We were able to finance the construction loan through another local lender here, and then pull out some of his cash and get him his equity back. So again, I think this was an 80-20 LTC type project. Just again, a smaller scale project. Net profit was, 179, 17%, on cost of goods sold. And, I feel like we have this model dialed in, but this is a great one to cut your teeth on. A duplex is always a great place to start. You always have, plan B when you go into these things. If I can't sell it for, the price that I need to make a couple bucks, then, convert it to a rental and, put a different finance vehicle in place. And that's kind of always been our mentality as we've embarked on these spec builds. If we couldn't sell it for the number we needed to, make stable, decent returns for our investors and ourselves, we would convert to rentals. So where do you start? I think the first place to start is understanding zoning maps, right? So if you just Google, Denver zoning maps, a whole map will pop up that's color coded, and I'll have, RMF, UMS3, R2. And once you can kind of wrap your head around, like, where can I increase density? Like, we're not trying to buy homes in single family zoning areas and scrape and build them, because we're not increasing density. I also think understanding sprawl is important. Like, where is the trend going? I mean, Denver's a great example because I just believe like I-25 is kind of a finite barrier for myself, and then the mountains. So everywhere in between there, if there's favorable zoning, like, that's a potential development area for us. I would say that local knowledge is important for me to, go into a Dallas market and Bishop Arts. Like, I don't know enough about Dallas to make, informed decisions. So right now, I just believe in, local boots on the ground knowledge is important to understanding where to start. So identifying areas in your local area that you think are cool or up and coming or trending, have services, different resources. And you'll see on a map here in a couple slides what I'm talking about further. But understanding zoning maps, and that's a quick, Google search. Most of our deals have been off market, quote unquote. That just means, like, if it's on the MLS, in our opinion, it's probably a little bit too late for it to make sense as a development opportunity. I'm not saying that's impossible to find, but from my perspective, we had a group of wholesalers who were constantly, coming to us. We have actually secured one deal by door knocking because we liked, the location of the property, and we were able to put a deal together. And then just networking, right? Just meeting, the players in the area, and it always works, right? I just believe if you cannot do back of the napkin math, the deal might not make sense. When I say back of the napkin, it's like, quick, here's my land price, here's what I think it'll be to build, and here's what I think the sales are. And, if you can try to, my target has always been like 80,000 per door. So on a duplex project, if I can model it where I'm like, all right, this can make about 80,000 per door, then we go ahead and do the deal. So I did mention previously talking to lenders. They're just a great resource. I think people sleep on that. And Michael, I've introduced you to Chris Evans before, and he's just, he's a wealth of knowledge. He's been in the industry a long time. He knows a ton of people, and in regards to title, to investors, to players. And it's just, don't sleep on talking to the local lenders and start building the relationships. Because if you do embark on this journey, you will need lenders to, fund your project. Conducting a yield study. This helps with the unknowns of parking, setbacks, etc. So what a yield study is, it'll cost, $1,500 to $2,000 from my experience, where you just work with a local architect and you say, hey, what can I build on? What kind of box can I build on this site? How many units can I get? What type of finished square footage can I get? And that will, really help you out to figure out what you're looking at. So parking, I mentioned parking specifically because a lot of times that can blow a deal up. You'll be limited by what you can build based on what the parking requirements are. So just working with an architect, they're the subject matter experts. They'll be the ones to really help you figure out what you could fit on that box. Another great place to go is the building department. I think the building department can really show you the step-by-step process of this is what it takes to get a site fully entitled. And when I mean fully entitled, I mean, from the single family home that we knock down to the set of plans with the duplex that we're going to build. They will, give you the step-by-step play of what the requirements are. And then understanding permitting times. This goes back to, the carrying costs that you need to be prepared for. So I know everybody's just backlogged, right? Everybody's got a shortage of staff at this point. You have more, affordability requirements coming into play. So like the environment is always changing, but it used to take, 6 months to push a permit duplex project through. Anything over a duplex could take you 12 to 18 months to push through the city with, multiple revisions, and just it takes effort. There's people who their profession is professional expediter. We've never hired one, we've done it ourselves, but it's a grind, but get in front of the buildings department, start building those relationships, understanding, I used to call it like a scavenger hunt. I just needed to figure out what department to go to next, to TOD and, just different requirements. So get in front of the building department. Finding a mentor or solid real estate network. I think that's always huge. We leverage our West Point network, quite often. I can't, say enough about that. I think everybody understands the importance in finding a good mentor and just leveraging your resources, right? I think I have at one point in here, it's about using other people's brains and other people's money. That's always kind of been the philosophy as well. And that goes into, the deal structure, right? Like, how are you going to finance and fund this deal? You're not, I've never done any deal with 100% all my own money. It's always going to take other people's money, and it's going to take, a team effort of, expertise. And, that's part of my closing thoughts, building the right team from, the right attorney to help you structure the deal, the right, lender, the right builder, the right investors. So just building the right team, structuring the deals, and staying positive. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, I could go back to that 12 unit slide. I really did not have construction expertise when I stepped into this. My business partner is the one who has the GC license. He got married the first year I got out here, and we were excavating on that 12 unit site. And, I made a decision to, export some dirt based off what the subcontractor told me. And, I made a $15,000 mistake right out the gate. And, you can't let that stuff overwhelm you. Mistakes are going to happen, and stay positive and just keep working through it, right? Like the most important thing is to get a project to the finish line. I know that was a lot to unpack, and Michael, I'll stop here if there's any specific questions on this slide.
Yeah, let us know if there's any questions on this slide. I mean, obviously, you talked through a lot of different things here, Brian. Some great advice. From my perspective, I mean, I guess you mentioned developing your network, talking to lenders, finding a mentor. I guess how did you go about starting off those relationships, kicking off those relationships, and making it a win-win for both sides?
I just think it's, people do business with people they like. And I think people invest in the people more than they do into the deal. So I just think, who we are as people, that's what, that's our credit, right? Like, so just having a good track record of success, whether it's the Army, West Point, your family, whatever it is, you just need to start letting people know, what your core values are. What are you about? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your why? And I think when people really start understanding, it makes it easier to do business. So, it's just formal introductions to start, right? Like, my business partner, he's the founder of this company. And, how he started, it's just amazing. Like he bought a bungalow in Sunnyside, which was why we were Sunnyside Builders. And he just knew he was sitting on potential. And he was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to knock my house down. I'm going to go be a server. I'm going to, live in the basement of this house, and I'm going to build a duplex. He probably went to 20 different banks just to say what he was trying to do before somebody gave him the time of day. And they were like, the last bank was like, you know what? If you connect with this guy, Tim, and he says he'll be your mentor, I'll do this deal for you. And that's why I'm so heavily. And then they were our first big investors in the 12 unit project. So it's just like, things exponentially compound, right? So it's just, I mean, it's cliche, but it's like, you got to knock on doors and keep knocking. You're going to be told no. And it's like, that's when you got to sell more and try harder and keep pushing, right? Like, very cliche, but it is the truth.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great advice.
All right. So 18 unit development. So this is very relevant to developing and building construction in today's environment. So if you look, we purchased this in July of 2018 for $565,000. It was an off-market deal from this guy I call Sneaky Pete. I purchased 3 different properties from him. He's a great guy, great resource, but he was just always getting things under contract, and then he would just assign it to us and put a little fee on it. The zoning was great here. The location was awesome ahead of the sprawl, and the back of the napkin worked. So just leveraging, what I've learned in the previous years of like, hey, the 12 unit project I bought for roughly $1 million. This one was 565. And I knew after I conducted a yield study that we could get 13 units. So it was like done, like no further, decisions needed to be made. I was like, that math is good. We'll keep working here. It's funny that you see the for sale sign on the front of the property here, because at one point, this was probably right, pandemic had started, we were fully entitled. I was struggling to, make the numbers work. I had went back and forth between, we're going to do an apartment, we're going to do condos, we're going to do an apartment. And again, just leveraging resources. I have friends in, multifamily lending that were trying to help me underwrite and make sense of the deal. And I just couldn't quite figure it out. Michael, I think I even spoke to you about this deal, right? Like with fiduciary responsibility and things of that nature. But, this one really tested everything we're about, so we were fully entitled, and we were like, let's just see if we can, develop and fully entitle and make a profit and not go through with the build. We were getting low ball offers, couldn't, we're maybe going to break even, maybe going to lose. And we just got to a point where we were like, you know what, let's just go, let's just build it, and we'll see what happens. So this is a yield study. So this is, if you look at the date on this is June of 2018. So we always try to make this part of our due diligence. When we get under contract and we're working towards closing, I like to get a yield study to confirm that, there's nothing, no easements, nothing crazy in place that is gonna, just ruin the deal. You'll see here, the yield produced 13 units, and that's when we're, back in napkin, we were like, done, 565, 13 units, let's do it. And then we were limited by the parking spots. So Lakewood's requirement is, basically a 1-to-1. If you have 1 unit, you need 1 spot. Sometimes you'll hear municipalities, if you're close to TOD, a trans-oriented development, they'll give you reduced parking of like, you need a half parking spot per unit or 3/4 parking spot per unit. But this is the idea of what a yield study is. And again, make it part of your due diligence, and, be prepared to invest, $1,500 to $2,000 into this. But it does give you peace of mind. So the 18 unit is, where the red dot is. Some of the previous deals that I showed you where, you see Sloan's Lake in the top right, like we were kind of off to the right. It's not really on the map, some of the spots we were building, but this was part of the packet when we were trying to, sell the fully entitled site. Just some things that we liked about it, like an Alamo Draft House, Target King Supers, post office, like the essentials that people look for, the breweries. Edgewater Public Marketplace was a cool, a collaborative eatery that, that's the bottom right photo that, a local developer built as well. And then we had some developments going on around us. And we weren't the first to the area, and typically we never are. That's not, our forte, but we don't want to be last either. So this is just to give you an idea of how, high level overview on a map, how we're starting to, evaluate, like, is this area cool or not? And like, who is our buyer? Who will want to live here? And just go from there. So this is the rendering of, if we go back, right, like this is where we started, a little house like this, yield study, and we get a rendering from the architect. One caveat about architects, I think they're an amazing resource You just have to be careful sometimes where they get very into the aesthetics of a building. So, if this, part that, is the darker shade of, brown, black, if that was metal, that significantly increases the cost. So you just got to be careful with their material selection. Sometimes they could really start driving up the cost of your build. So where we ended up fully entitled, we ended up with 18 one-bedroom, one-bath units ranging from 532 square feet to 657. So we just believed more density was better. The deal penciled better the more units we could get in. And honestly, the intent was, you can see on the bottom, to solve for the affordability challenge in the Denver metro area. There's nowhere right now with anybody selling anything with a 3 in front. And that was kind of the theory we hung our hat on. And that's what we ran with. Rents have constantly been increasing. Like, you couldn't even get into a 1-bedroom for less than your mortgage would be by financing, a unit for $312,000. Again, this is just the pro forma of, how this is how we modeled it. This is not how I landed, because I'm still not done, but this is what we took off with. So just kind of looking at some of these numbers, right? My total construction budget, 4.85. Sales, I was projecting 5.6, with an average of 312 a unit. So again, quick math. I was like, like target low, target high, a little bit of bracket. I was like, I think we'll land somewhere in here. Like, we have no other choice because, we just did it, right? The house is uninhabitable. I didn't sell the property. So it was time to build it, and, just kind of have the belief that it would work out. So this is the 18 unit current day. I am almost done. We have 18 contracts and we average 357,000 per unit, which again, so everybody's keeping a pulse on the market here, right? Like, inflation's coming and sales prices were, getting unattainable. And then honestly, it worked out in my favor because it helped me, get to the finish line in a better fashion. The caveat to that is that, my construction is over budget $300,000 as well. So yes, I sold it for more, but it also cost me more to build it. And, even out the gate, it was, lumber, our lumber line item was over budget, like $90,000, so I just knew we've been up against it throughout the course of this project. And, we're close to the finish line. We're going through final inspections now. We got a little bit of stuff to do, but, knock on wood, I believe, this deal is just kind of, goes into the closing thoughts of building the right team, possessing grit, tenacity, and optimism. Like, you're going to deal with self-doubt. You're going to deal with anxiety. You're going to deal with stress, but there's a solution to every challenge. And as long as you approach, real estate and building in that fashion, I think you will be okay. And you're going to learn something every time you're involved in any deal for that matter. But, yeah, that's what I got, Michael. So I'll just kind of leave it there. And if anybody's got any specific questions.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat, but as you think through and absorb Brian's presentation, please throw some questions in the chat if you have them. Going back to, this 18 unit, Brian, you and I talked about at one point during your development cycle, you were maybe considering shifting to renting the property versus selling off individual units. So I guess maybe take us back to maybe your original business model of how did you decide to build for sale versus build for rent? And then do you ever adjust exit plans or strategy like mid-development?
Yeah, so back in 2019, we built, I feel like the market softened a little bit in 2019. I think I had about 10 specs going. I had triplex, duplex, and 6 unit. So I was a bit personally leveraged, and the market softened a bit, and I couldn't get the sales price on 1 unit. So what we ended up doing was, putting some type of bridge loan in place. And we still have that unit now that's, in our rental portfolio. To be quite frank, I wish I would have saved more of our units, from when we were building back in 2017 and 2018, because obviously the appreciation is, but you can't think like that, right? Like, you need to take that knowledge and apply it when you move forward. again, Michael, I'm no expert at underwriting, multifamily apartments, and that's kind of where, again, leveraging the network, right? Like, I'm happy to share with you my challenges and my struggles to maybe you have a piece of knowledge that, I haven't thought about, or I'm not thinking clearly because I'm letting, stress or this, that, or the other thing overwhelm me. So, just leveraging the different resources to make sure you're, thinking straight. That's what it is. Obviously, I wanted to hold this building. It just looked like from how we were trying to model it, it would have took 10 years to pay back investors their initial capital investment. And I just couldn't really make sense of that. And fortunately, we crushed it on the sales side. And, going back to building the right team, right? Like my realtor, like, I didn't have her do this at 1%. She's an investor in the project. She's representing the project. So it's skin in the game, right? So she was, not just trying to move units to get a 1% commission. She was trying to, sell units to maximize value. And honestly, the supply and demand worked in our favor. There's just an inventory crisis. And fortunately, we were able to, capitalize on that.
Got it. Nice. So you talked a little bit about, some of the projects that you guys have had in the works, things that you guys have done on the development side. Obviously you guys are a construction company as well and can be hired as a GC. I think we've had some interesting conversations in the past where you say that, it's almost like interviewing potential clients as well, right? And like you don't necessarily take everybody on. And sometimes they may not necessarily be a good fit for you. But can you talk us through how you evaluate if you want to work with a client and if it's a good fit to work with them on the GC construction side?
I think that's a great question. And, we used to think like volume, was our answer to our business model. And what I've learned is volume kills, right? Like I need quality over the volume of clients. I just believe if somebody thinks development is easy and they're jumping in it to make a quick buck, then they're not the right client. I think some baseline construction knowledge needs to exist because I'm still trying to dial in this 18 unit budget, right? So like when I work with a client and they're like, how much is it going to cost? And I'm like, well, I think around here, but to get an exact dollar, it's almost impossible. So I need people who are, solution oriented. They don't, they're not negative people. I like working with optimists and just have to have the right kind of attitude. You need to be able to make decisions quickly. You need to be able to just communicate effectively and just be understanding. Like I said, I think every project I've had some type of challenge or setback. There's projects where you can dig into the ground. You can start the project off with like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, like I believe the excavation is going to be $100,000. Then you dig into the ground and there's some contaminated soil. And you're like, well, guess what? It's going to cost $70,000 to remove this soil. Like people lose their minds at that stuff sometimes, but it's like, you just have to understand, like, we don't know what's in the ground, there's unforeseen site conditions. So I guess it really reverts back to understanding the contract and making sure that the expectations are set correctly. There's multiple contractual vehicles to enter in with a builder and just ensuring that everybody is on the same page as, if this, then that, as long as you have the right expectations, I think it leads to a healthier relationship rather than finger pointing, right? Like you can end up in that scenario quite a bit as a builder. And it shouldn't be like that. Like this is a human made thing. Humans make mistakes. Like this isn't created in a factory. Every build is basically a prototype, right? Like, so it's not going to be perfect. And you just have to prepare for that.
Oh, great. All right. Well, last opportunity for folks on the webinar to ask questions. It looks like there's a question about, whether or not the webinar is being recorded. It is being recorded. We'll actually package it up and post it on our website here within the next couple hours, as well as send it out via email. So you guys have it and can watch it again. Brian, like one fun question. I guess what has been your biggest surprise in all your years of development? Like biggest surprise, challenge, gotcha. Good story for us to kind of close out.
I I think the most important thing on any new build, like this is one of the first things I ever learned, set the foundation height correctly and make sure the property drains, right? Like if you do nothing else right in the build, make sure you do that right, because water will lead to, a ton of, different, different challenges and warranty calls down the way. So like, that's the biggest watch out. Shoot, I mean, I don't know what my funnest story is. I've had a lot of fun with the development type stuff. Like some of my bigger investors have been, the West Point network. Like my personal, the TAF guys that I've worked with, some of the Army football team, like, for them just to believe, in me, in us, in what we do, and then to deliver and, give a return to investors, like that's cool to me. Like that makes me feel happy. I'm not in this for personal wealth. I've never been that type of person. Like I just like to seek a challenge, and that's why you'll see me, doing 18 units. It's like we're always going to try to push the envelope, and I just believe you can push through anything, and you will figure it out with a can-do attitude. Yeah, I mean it's just taking the plunge. Like it's been, I've had the anxiety and like, oh man, I got all this debt, and you just keep pushing through. You'll get through it. It's not going to kill you.
No, I love positivity and mindset. I guess there's one other question that did come in, as far as planning and preparing for potential construction defect litigation. Is that something that you guys consider? Like, what are some of the things that you guys do to plan and prepare for that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So the type of insurance policies that you put in place are significantly important. You'll see on a duplex project, I could just get away with, I could just get away with, my typical general liability and builder's risk, right? But on something, this 18 unit project, I have a wrap policy in place. So that is significantly more expensive. That insurance policy for this project probably cost about $140,000. But what the wrap policy does is everybody who touches this site is enrolled in this policy, and it does help protect you for, the attorney's fees down the road with future litigation. I've also, our documentation throughout this build process is it's all over it, right? Like I have so many pictures, so many videos, structural engineer observations, acoustic engineers involved, a wrap administrator involved. You have so many different layers of inspections to make sure that things are being built to quality and not being built cheaply. So that's another, means and method to protect yourself. So I would say, don't shy away from the right insurance policy, and make sure your documentation and QA/QC is on point, because yes, you're constantly at risk in the building industry for sure. And then service warranty. As long as you service warranty, people don't get upset. If you ghost them, they're going to start getting real upset.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time, Brian. I mean, I think you've provided a ton of value to our audience and for Redeem Team Mastermind members. So at this point, let's go ahead and call it a wrap. To the degree that you want to, give folks your contact information, whether that's email or, just your website, how can people get a hold of you here? Go forward.
It's on, let me just share one more time. It's on the front slide here. So honestly, feel free to, call me, text me, email me. I'm always happy to help. I'm always happy to provide some input. Again, I might not be an expert in everybody's market, but, I could give you high level of like, hey, looks like it makes sense, or, have you confirm this? Have you confirm that? I guess one last piece of advice would be asbestos testing, before, make that part of your due diligence as well, because asbestos remediation can range from $5,000 to $50,000. So that's a significant due diligence item that everybody should keep in mind prior to, doing a scrape and build.
All right. Well, you guys can see Brian's info right there. Once again, really appreciate it, Brian. That beard's looking good. Stay shaped. Good hair. So, we'll call it a wrap there. Thanks for being a friend of Redeem Investments.
Of course.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, everybody.